Hi there, I'm Deb Crow, and I want to welcome you to Season 4 of Imperfect, the Heart-Centered Leadership Podcast. This is a podcast where we connect, learn, and laugh together with authentic and courageous leaders from all over the globe. You will learn from leaders you haven't even met yet. You will gain new tools to add to your leadership toolkit, because leadership belongs to all of us. It is not measured by stature or title. So please pull up a chair and listen in. This is the Imperfect, Heart-Centered Leadership Podcast. Welcome back to Imperfect, the Heart-Centered Leadership Podcast. Really excited to welcome Gareth Evans to the show. And I think we're going to have a great conversation aligned on energy, but on several different levels. So I had a fun time reading and doing my due diligence. So welcome to the show, Gareth.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm going to ask you 4 leadership questions, and then we'll pivot to our Fab 4, which is just those rapid firing questions. So our listeners in 65 countries can get to know a little bit about you outside of your company and your title and all those extrinsic things. So are you ready?
Let's do it.
Okay. First question. You talk about leading in the future as it pertains to commercial energy landscape. And I know our listeners are going to hear those words and think, what does he mean by that? So we'd love a definition. And then could you talk about that future leadership and how it's, I'm going to assume here, helping and not hindering our climate problem on a global level?
Yes. My personal mission is to create affordable, clean, reliable power for everyone. Today, that's starting with commercial industrial businesses. So energy is truly the lifeblood of everything. You know, we all try and live our lives and operate our businesses. And without it, we actually couldn't do much. Everything would grind to a halt pretty quickly. And I think we've all taken energy for granted. I think it's a very magical thing. It shows up when we want it. We don't know where it comes from, how it arrives where we need it. And up until now, it's been fairly affordable, reliable, and sustainability wasn't really a topic of conversation until probably the last 5 years at the magnitude it is today. And prior to that, there was early signs of it for the last 10, 15 years, I'd say. But yes, businesses are the biggest energy users. They are the biggest carbon emitters. They also have the money and the ability to do something about it. And I think what's very exciting for me and what's changing is to be able to build an energy system at your facility to generate and store energy right where you need it versus relying on someone else providing it to you is now the more profitable opportunity and the more sustainable opportunity for in many cases, not all cases. So we want to support businesses to explore their options, do in a really independent and agnostic way. We represent their best interests. And this is all with a view to creating a more profitable and sustainable future for all. And in terms of the future leadership aspect, a big part of this is building education and awareness for individuals around the world, because there's a lot of misconceptions out there. There's a lot of bad data. There's a lot of negative press. Mm-hmm. Energy is exciting. It's critical. Let's make it really accessible to everyone and understandable to everyone.
I'm sitting here just ruminating about some of the things that you've said, and the words like solution are coming to mind, and being able to be a business and now not only control the future of my footprint from an ESG perspective, but also do it independently from my own place. Like, that's phenomenal. I'm also thinking about a conversation I had with Patrick Crane, who was on the show, and he's a CXO. And I have to connect you too, because just the way your enthusiasm and the way you speak of now and the future and your visionary leadership, it's just one of the joys that I get. I consider myself to be this digital nomad concierge where I have a conversation and it makes me think of someone else. And there's certainly some alignment between you and him. So I will connect you with him.
That'd be amazing.
I love the independence of this and the vision of what you've done. And I think there's so much strength in that. and I'll be excited to see that unfold. My second question has permanent residency on the show, and I've asked almost 270 leaders this question. So what imperfections does Gareth bring to his heart-centered leadership?
Many. I think my biggest learning is that I get completely drained, bored stiff with the minutiae of data. And so I like to think big. I like to build teams. I like to lead people. I find it exhausting dealing with finances and the admin side of HR and all those sort of things. So I try and attract the right talent and build a diverse and multi-talented team to fill in those gaps, because you need those attentions to detail to move the needle. But it's not the strength that I bring to the table, that's for sure.
Now, my third question is, I want to give you an opportunity. I'm going to bridge kind of the questions here, and it'll lead in and segue into my third question. So my third question is, where did the love of our planet as a whole start for you? Was it a young boy? And maybe you can preface that by telling us a little bit about how you landed in this space and what you maybe did or did not to have that become a serendipitous moment for you.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride, honestly. And I think for your listeners who are thinking about career planning and things like that, there was zero planning. It was being in the moment, saying yes to the right opportunities at the right time, and really believing in the fact that people around you and your network, when you put kind of the asks out there, they'll kind of help make it happen. For me, it started with, my parents were both police officers. We we're a good middle income family, but we were never brought up to believe in materialistic things. It was always experiences and adventures. At an early age, the age of 9, my dad took a role in the Caribbean, trying to support the police force there to manage the drugs coming up from South America to the US. And so got a very early experience to travel, to adventure, to seeing new cultures, new ideas, and that carried through for a long time. I always found geography a natural kind of passion and love as a subject in school. I studied environmental science, but I didn't know at the time, so I took a year out before going to university. A gap year is very popular in the UK, less so in Canada, the US, and other places around the world. But I went off and did charity work in South America, and one of the projects was actually doing environmental research to stop a highway from being built through a national park. And so we were looking for evidence of puma cats in the national park. We were educating and training local villagers to dry their herbs so they could sell them legally in the market, and teaching kids English. And, all those sort of adventures led me to actually decide to do environmental science at university. I didn't know what I wanted to do after university, so took another gap year, trained with the Shaolin monks in Northeast China for a few months with a few friends, traveled around the world, and landed in Canada, which we were talking about before the show. I ended up meeting my wife there, but I ended up getting a job as an environmental consultant, and I was responsible for helping clean up old oil and gas well sites throughout the Rocky Mountains. And so that was a really exciting time for me, living in remote wilderness of Canada, hanging out with big construction crews, and actually returning land to its traditional uses, mostly crown forestry land. But the real kind of turning point, Deb, was I took a role in Iraq right after the Gulf War, and I was supporting the biggest oil and gas companies in the world to move into the region because our economies needed that energy. Energy has always been the center of conflict. It's been the center of sovereignty that you were describing before. And for me, the turning point was here we were unlocking the energy reserves for our lives back in the West, and yet the local populace, after years of conflict, was surviving on 2 hours of power a day. And it just showed to me that the systems that were built, they have many single points of failure. One tree falling on a power line can knock out power for an entire community. In their case, their infrastructure being devastated. And so that leads to bad things happening. And so we were kind of on the back end of that. We were getting mortar attacked most evenings. We were, the targets of, we had to have personal protection teams every day. And what we were being told and educated was these aren't terrorists. They're not insurgents. These are people trying to feed their families who are being paid dollars to execute these attacks. And so that was where the mission really kicked in. How do we ensure that everyone has access to energy? Because with that, it opens up so many doors. And it's been an ongoing journey. There's lots of other stories behind the scenes, but that's the basis of it.
I got to tell you, I interview the coolest people on this show. Like you've just joined the ranks. Like, talk about a diversified life story, leadership journey, diversity amongst so many different sectors. And I'm a yoga teacher, so I got to throw in another question. So spending time with the monks.
Yeah.
You're familiar with the term equanimity?
I'm not.
Equanimity means mental calmness and composure.
Yep.
So a lot of the certified health executives or surgeons that I've coached, they teach this in medical school.
Okay.
So the Coles notes of it from a leadership or business acumen perspective is you can listen and be heart-centered, but logic is in the forefront of your mind. Mm-hmm. And emotion's not going to hijack your amygdala to interrupt that logic. So when you were with the monks, how did your habits of thinking and your level of equanimity, how did that open the bandwidth for you? And where do you see it showing up in your passion and the trajectory that you've now taken, which really seems to be like tried and true passion for you now?
Yeah, my mind was definitely blown with that experience. It was in like truly remote Northeast China. 12 hours on a train, northeast of Beijing. The local populace were farmers, and the opportunity for their kids was to drop them off at this monastery at the age of 3, and they would live there until they were 18 plus. That's where they were educated. That's where they learned the life of a Shaolin monk. And we got to experience that. And so the kind of eye-opening moments for me was seeing the power of chi energy. They were firm believers in every morning we'd get up, we'd run up and down a hill, we'd stretch. And then when the sun was coming up, we would do our Tai Chi and build our chi energy.
Yeah.
And seeing that put into action by them and the physical feats that they were able to achieve, the calmness, the ability to meditate deeply. They would teach us manual acupuncture, just things that you could do in terms of being able to touch pressure points. I just showed to me we're very much in the West focused on like what's the symptom versus like what's the cause.
Yeah.
And that's carried through. And I'm a firm believer in having good mental wellness routines and making sure that for me, it's not about work-life balance. It's like work-life integration. How do you ensure that?
Oh, I always say that on this show. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And you know what? It's so interesting to me because I sit here thinking about the mental calmness and composure that you have. You went from this serene, beautiful space of eloquent equanimity into war-laden country, and that set you up for success. Because I think once you master and hone and sustain that, it doesn't get any better than emotional resilience, does it?
Yeah, and it definitely takes the setbacks to remind you, post that experience, I suffered from a bit of anxiety and post-traumatic stress. And it took me realizing that through health and wellness and exercise and mental calmness, you can kind of overcome all of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then as a result, things get thrown at you and you compare it back to those experiences and say, what am I worried about, really?
Yeah. Okay, my fourth question, it's kind of fun that I already had this as a question before you told me your parents were police officers, but you were probably well brought up with structure and discipline if both your parents were police officers. But I think about now everything that you've shared about, I believe we are the leaders of today based on our whole life journey from kindergarten, our parents, our grandparents, our teachers, volunteering, external sources, community, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep.
So when you think about that structure and discipline that you've honed so well, you alluded with some candor and humor about all the things you don't like in business. So we shouldn't be working in our business anyways. I'm with you. I like pointing at the North Star and working on the business, not in it. And you've put that structure and discipline in. Where is there some room that you still see that you want to do that running a company today? Because I think this is a question that a lot of leaders ponder and even maybe over ruminate on. And where do we leave room to keep finding more structure and discipline so we can stay working on our business? What's a strategy that you would share?
We are very, very values driven and culture orientated within the business. And so we have a few key aspects of the business. We have our flywheel effect of like, what are the 5 key aspects of our business that we need to constantly be unlocking and streamlining to make sure the flywheel starts spinning. And then that links back to our core values: challenge limits, adapt purposefully, empower co-creation. And so we make sure that we reflect back to those all of the time. And I think it's a really interesting question, because we just did a feed forward exercise within the team where, what is it that you want to work on? And then people can provide that feedback and you say thank you and you move on and you digest it in your own time versus the feedback which has a negative context. So the feed forward exercise, I said, how can I hold the business to account for delivering our milestones and objectives and goals? And it's definitely a challenge, because we're creating a new market, a new industry, we're educating new customers. We have our targets and goals and aspirations, but there's also no playbook. And so a lot of it is kind of gut instinct and thumbsuck exercises in terms of what we believe we can achieve. And how do you find the balance between driving urgency and impact and holding people to account while also having the empathy that this isn't a simple quick fix. These are long sales cycles, long engagement cycles, and these projects can take years to develop, but the impact of them once deployed are incredible. So it's like that push, pull, patience, urgency. I definitely haven't quite figured that out yet, but I think having the...
Well, I can help you out, and we didn't script this. I just wrote the playbook, and it released in November, and it's called the Heart-Centered Leadership Playbook, and that's how you open the bandwidth. And it's like the gardening analogy. You plant the seed, and you got to water it, nurture it, and look after it. But I love the concept of feed forward. I often like to talk about with teams, fail forward. And nobody has to fail, but it's learning to know that there's the openness within the structure and the discipline to fail. And oh my goodness, maybe we're going to have a collective learning moment, and the innovation and creativity that comes out of that, it's like an open highway of progression. It's beautiful to witness. When you keep the constraints there, but the walls can move, right?
Yeah.
So same kind of analogy, but how fun is that? Okay, I'm going to switch to my Fab 4. We don't want you to think. We just want to know what's sitting on the top of that energetic, I have to make a pun, brilliant mind of yours. Question number 1, what word or phrase shows up daily in your leadership language?
Wolf.
Wolf. Is it an acronym?
No, it's, I believe I need to plan, hunt, kill, or perish and die. So it's all about...
It's an action verb with leadership undertones. I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, name a book that you've read at any juncture in your life. Tell us the name of the book and the author, and why was it impactful to you?
Actually, I just read The Alchemist for the first time, which is obviously very famous, but I don't know how I'd missed it for so long. And I loved it because it's all about kind of believing in and connecting with the world around you and navigating your vision. And so, really enjoyable. Very easy read.
It'll be one that you'll go back to. It'll be a frequent flyer for you for sure. That's a great book. It's one that I've bookmarked and highlighted, and I've got Post-it notes on it, and it's a great book. Okay, third question. I got to give you a little bit of context here. So I'm granting you a wish. and you get to have dinner with a leader of your choice. Now, this leader may be living or maybe they've passed away. Who are you having dinner with, and what is the dinner conversation?
I'd always have dinner with mum and dad first because family is super important. I don't get to see them a lot. I left home early and I now live a long way away from them. So I'd say that. But if I had to choose someone different, I'd say probably Richard Branson. I really like his leadership style. I'd like to explore how he used his crazy marketing mind to pull off the stunts he did to challenge the status quo and really disrupt a very old school monopolized industry.
You know, it's interesting. We've had parents and grandparents be in that answer, and we've had him show up quite frequently on the show. He is a disruptor, and and he's kind. There was a great article that I saw when I was traveling. I picked up a magazine, and it showed the head office. I forget what location. And there was a gentleman sleeping on the couch, and Richard came to visit, and whoever was on the couch, his supervisor approached Richard and said, let's call him Gareth. Gareth was up all night to fix that problem that crept up yesterday, and he's super sad he's not awake to see you. And then it shows Richard putting a virgin blanket on him.
Oh, wow. That's nice.
But it goes to show you that a picture can create misperception unless there's open communication to completely turn it around. And that was basically the nuts and bolts of the article. Is sometimes we can see a picture, we automatically want to think the worst, like, why is that guy sleeping at work? And when he had been up all night trying to fix an operational issue from a programming perspective, and they wanted to have it done before Richard was coming in, and they didn't. So it was just such a cool thing.
That's
okay,
awesome.
so I'm going to have you finish the show by finishing a sentence, but I just want to say it's been so fun getting to know you a little bit and having this interview. And I think as a woman and a wife and a mom and now a nana, I'm thrilled to know that there's people like you creating a future world for all of our young people to live with vitality and health and not worry some of global warming continuing to go in the wrong direction. So I want to say thank you for your innovation and leadership in that regard.
Thank you for the feedback, and thank you for helping us bring awareness and education as to what's possible.
Absolutely. Okay, finish the show by finishing this sentence for me. Heart-centered leadership is?
Living in the moment, saying yes, challenging your limits, and adapting with purpose.
Thanks so much for joining me today on Imperfect, the Heart-Centered Leadership Podcast. I hope you've enjoyed the show today and have learned some new tools for your leadership toolkit from our amazing heart-centered guest. If you like the show, feel free to give us a rating and a review, and we always welcome your feedback anytime. If you're ready to master the art of heart, my new book, The Heart-Centered Leadership Playbook, is now available on Amazon, or you can click the link below in our description.